So, are you Roland or are you Captain?
Bear with me for a second while I just make sure.
Man, you're going to have 6 cameras.
7.
That's a whole amount of fucking editing.
I know. I'm thinking this is a wonderful idea now, but you know, when I get 6 months time in the edits week going.
I shot a project once with 9 cameras. I just wanted to see how much.
Yeah, okay, we're ready to start now. I think.
Will we get changed? Just do the clap.
Yep.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, do a big old clap.
Cut to a small provincial town on the way to everywhere, on the fringes of everything, not far from nowhere. A marginal place at once urban, rural and suburban, yet strangely none of these at all.
We left these edgelands long ago, and thoughts of the place filled us with despair. Ugly, decaying, regressive, repressive, backward and uninspired. Its bleak environs and stilted life continued to haunt us.
It must have been easier for you to hate from afar.
Aesthetically, Longford town is flat, and it's not very flattering. There's a weird kind of synthesis of the dilapidation, the lack of colour, the dowdiness of Longford and people's thoughts on Longford, you know. In the last 20 years or so, the socioeconomic profile of the town has changed considerably. Longford would score very high on all the poverty indices, you know, so single parent families, traveller families, new communities, low income families, children out of school, leaving school early, unemployment for young people would be very high in Longford. 2008, for instance, it just looked like the builders were sitting down having their 10 o'clock tea and they disappeared. Like there's almost kind of like there was almost a sense of a lit fag still in the ashtray, the dump truck still ticking over. Like, you know, there was this sense of kind of absurdity about the way everything was just kind of abandoned.
Sweet smiling village, loveliest of the lawn, thy sports are fled, and thy charms withdrawn. Amid thy bowers the tyrant's hand is seen, and desolation saddens all thy green. One only master grasps the whole domain, and half a tillage stints the smiling plain. No more thy glassy brook reflects the day, but choked with sedges works its weedy way. Along thy glades the solitary guest, the hollow sounding, bitten guards its nest. Amidst thy deserts walks the lapwing flies, and tires the echoes with unvaried cries. Sunk are thy bowers in shapeless ruin all, and the long grass o'ertops the mouldering wall, and trembling, shrinking from the spoiler's hand, far, far away the children leave the land. Ill fares the land to hastening ills a prey, where wealth accumulates and men decay.
Ghost estates are something that appeared essentially during the crisis, but were a phenomenon that were going back a lot further than that. During the Celtic Tiger, we got so used to seeing construction sites, got so used to seeing development in every part of the country that we really didn't notice these sites. You know, they were just one more construction site, one more development that was happening, and one more symbol perhaps then of the continued good health of the Celtic Tiger. After the 2008 global financial crisis, the credit crunch, and when that became apparent in Ireland, that Ireland was experiencing some problems, ghost estates then became essentially a way to sort of locate that, became a way to sort of explain that or express that. So in one sense, they became visible during this period because we were looking for something to look at the spatial manifestation of the crisis in Ireland. In terms of the symbolic representations then of ghost estates during this period, they become to be sites where people negotiate this idea of a collapsed vision of the future, an idea of the death of a Celtic tiger dream, for example. So you get these stories which look at sort of the hubris of developers, who'd go off and, build 100 or 200 houses in the middle of nowhere and trying to sell them to a population. You get the hubris of the ordinary people, who are, supposedly living beyond their means or borrowing more than they can afford to borrow, and, basing their livelihood on the increased price of their house. So, whether that's true or not, obviously I would argue it's not, but those became sort of narratives through which people in Ireland began to make sense of the crisis.
Well, I've moved in here in 2005. When I was looking to buy a house, I had pretty much two options within my budget. There was a nice brand new house out here, just outside the town, or a house in an established estate, but it was very run down. When I was speaking to the letting or the estate agents, he gave me all the spiel about, how there was a hotel being built over there and that there's great rejuvenation in the area and everything like that. So I suppose I was sold a dream. At the start, it was all nice and rosy. There was very few people. They were still selling the houses, so there didn't seem to be any major issues with the estate. Coming to the winter time of that year, then we started to see a few problems in that just couldn't keep the house warm. The fire in the sitting room just couldn't even keep the sitting room warm. It progressively got worse then, year after year, to the point where the storage was backing up. The smell in the estate was just outrageous. Half the houses remained empty. The dream didn't materialise. The hotel was never built. The roads were never fixed. The council wouldn't take over the estate. The list could go on and on.
At the same time, there's also a counter-narrative going on which looks at ghost estates as an example or representative of the failures of international financial capitalism. So that capitalism is a system that's constantly built on needing to sort of overcome the next barrier, constantly built on shaky foundations, and that the financial crisis then is representative of intermittent crises that inevitably come up in capitalism because they're inherent to the system itself. There was attempts then to sort of read ghost estates within a similar framework. So ghost estates in Ireland are indicative or representative of this international crisis of capitalism because they're indicative of money, international finance coming into Ireland, at an excessive rate, being pumped into new buildings in the built environment, pumped into a sort of consumer economy, which is based on not a production of new commodities essentially, but a speculative increase in the price of the asset. So the price of the asset being the house.
I looked on his short, and then he was gone. Sacrificial mother, barely alone. Capricious, pernicious, starry imperfection and destruction. In my flight to Caucasus, he lives on.
Some sort of narrative has gone on, has been woven in that Longford people are the greatest purveyors of this concept that Longford is a shithole. And like, I have 3 young children, and they think Longford's great because they haven't been exposed to that narrative yet. They'll start to be exposed to it in secondary school, and then they will be lambasted by it when they go to college or when they go further afield, whatever it is. It's kind of like Longford is fair game. It's like, for whatever reason, we've just become the whipping boy, you know. And I remember being in a pub in Battlebridge where the landlady, I was doing business there, and the landlady turned to the barman and she said, "Paul, Shane is from Longford. Have you ever met a Longford man before?" And he shook my hand. He said, "Oh, sorry for your troubles." And I said, "Where the fuck are you from?" And he said, "Kildare." And I went, "And?"
Okay. Ready?
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Longford Town has a sort of reputation as being quite rough, and has a reputation of well, it has quite a high poverty index. Could you comment on that at all? Like, I mean, do you think that's an accurate representation of the place?
Yeah, I don't really, to be quite honest. I think the town's reputation is very undeserved. You know, like, that's not to be foolish and to kind of try and gloss over the cracks. There are issues, of course there are. But I would say that the issues here are no greater or less than issues in other towns around this region of the same size. One of the big problems that Longford Town and the county on a wider scale has, and I think a lot of our social ills, if you like, go back to this, is unemployment. Even in the good times, when unemployment was at 5%, say, in Ireland, it was double that rate here. It was at 11%. Now, if you look at it, we have a national rate of unemployment of about 9%, say, 9-10% in the country. But in Longford, it's realistically it's double that. When I came here first, it was beginning to take off. You know, that was kind of 2001, 2002. The houses were being built. You know, there was a real sense of, this is our time.
There's an element that Longford was a market town. Like I remember reading John McGahern. You know, if you read John McGahern or a lot of, you know, his stuff, they talk about Longford as, you know, it's a place where you went to get a loan of a bank manager or buy a car, or, you know, it was a market town. It had a lot of kind of, it had a lot of light industry, and that has almost collapsed.
Barefoot and dispossessed, the conscious repetition of history. New underclasses, we build our precarious lives in the shell of a failed ideological system whose values continue to triumph.
What repetition of history, conscious or otherwise, do you refer to?
The land once enclosed by empire, now enclosed by brand names and franchise stores. We are colonized by the car, displaced by the out-of-town retail convenience. An endless network of bypasses, slip roads and roundabouts that lead us nowhere.
Some people call this progress. I take it you do not.
One, two. Could you say anything?
Yeah, I suppose I can. What would you like me to say? Here's to you as good as you are, and here's to me as bad as I am. But as good as you are and as bad as I am, I'm as good as you, as bad as I am. You know, I've seen from my own background and my own upbringing in Leitrim, people who were traditionally called as blow-ins always had a more positive view of any particular area that they were in than the locals had. And so it is for here. Sort of the word on the street, so to speak, would be, you know, Longford is a shithole, and, you know, they don't look very favourably on it and can't wait till to get out of here and blah, blah, blah. But people have to live their lives wherever they're living their lives. And as a blow-in here, I see Longford in a whole different light than that. I mean, I see it as generally a very positive place to be. You know, I mean, just as an example with Longford LGBT, which I'm involved with, people thought we were bananas starting up a LGBT group here, because they thought it'd be just, you'd be bet up going down the street just for being involved with it. And it has been far from the case. And in fact, I can't think of a negative in relation to it. People have been welcoming. Social support organisations have come to us asking how they can help. And, you know, it's been really a positive experience. And that's in an area where traditionally people would tend to sort of do a double take or whatever.
Public na hÉireann, the provisional government of the Irish Republic, to the people of Ireland. Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old traditions of nationhood. Ireland through us summons her children to her flag and strike for her freedom. Having organised and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organisation, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizens' Army, having patiently perfected her disciplines, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment. And supported by her exiled children in America and by gallant allies in Europe, but relying in the first on her own strength, she strikes in full confidence of victory.
The name Longford comes from the Irish Longford. A Longford was a camp or a princely fortress dwelling. It has all of those senses. The Longford here was built by the O'Farrells of Annally, who were the chiefs of the area. Post-1255, we'll say, that fortress was built roughly, as you say, where the empty shopping centre is and into the grounds of Connolly Barracks, former Connolly Barracks. If the O'Farrells would have been dominant until 1570 or so, when they submitted to Queen Elizabeth I, and Annally at that stage became County Longford. Now, by submitting to the Queen, they accepted English rule, English law, English customs, but they would still have held on to their territory, their land. Now, in 1620, under King James I, who was Elizabeth's successor, the plantation of Longford began. And it was a significant new departure because, first of all, landed families came in, Anglo-Irish, we'll call them, or English, also some Scottish, in the form mainly of the Forbeses. They would have been granted land in the county at that stage. And some of them would have brought tenants with them. So not only was there the imposition of a layer of landlords, but there were also some tenant farmers who were part of this new plantation process. Other families that arrived at the time included the Angers. The Angers were granted Longford in 1620. Francis Ainger was the person in question there. And he effectively set up a new town. Longford, when it grew up in the medieval period, was on the north bank of the Camlin. But when Ainger arrived in 1620, he began planning a new town south of the river in really what's now Main Street. It was quite different from the older town in that you had quite a long, wide street. And there were plots on either side of the street of regular shape which were given to tenants. And we know that some of those tenants were English, that there was a significant settler population in Longford in the middle of the 1600s, up to the 1641 rebellion. And then the O'Farrells rose up and tried to regain their control over the town and surrounding area, and they attacked the castle. So again, you have that tension, frontier, the frontier motif comes through again, where you have a Gaelic family, which was at that stage was on the wane to some extent, trying to reassert itself against a new significant English landowner and his tenants.
Prologue. It was the 25th of June. He had returned to the estate. There had been time since he last visited. The big blue foundation stones pierced the soil and slowed his pace. It was still very much a sight. He could hear the Protestant church bell call its hollow chime for 1 o'clock. The crows overhead were making a racket of some sort as a hawk appeared high above and gracefully swam the skies, unhurried. Yeah, so this is the seat of the Lefroys, and this is their house. And in the book it's called Birchview, but the name of this place has inspired it, and it's called Carriglass, and Carriglass Manor. It was built in the Gothic style, which was in keeping with the time. And the Lefroys were a relatively new family to Ireland. They were Huguenots and had escaped France after the Battle of Agincourt, where the Protestant people were pushed out. But yeah, the house is magnificent, but it's slowly falling apart now. It was to be a hotel, which was the plan for Carriglass, but sadly that didn't happen.
So, what was Lefroy's relationship then with like the peasantry at the time, and Longford's colonial history?
Well, you know, Longford has a fascinating colonial history. It was part of Connacht originally, and then Leinster. And to my mind, Longford was the edge of the empire for a while. You know, in the early days of English expansion. And Lefroy's relationship with the Longford and this place is they had come from France originally, and he himself had come from Limerick. And the first owner of Carriglass was a man called Newcomen, who, funnily enough, in an imitation of or a repeat pattern of Irish history, there was an economic crash, and he was a banker and lost all his wealth and died. He took his own life, in fact. And Trinity College owned the property from then on and rented it to Lefroy. The cranes, like sky rafters, had come to a standstill. A tricolour wrapped round itself blue as best it could. Pioneering buchalons and thistles were beginning to reclaim some of the footings. He walked the grounds where they had worked. Some houses were near finished, while others lay like half-built slums. When I was a boy, I suppose, we would have always drove past Carriglass, and it held a fascination for me as a young child because I never was inside it. And I often wondered what it was like. But it wasn't until I began to write my book that I actually I ventured across the wall, and at that point the Celtic Tiger had ended and the estate is as we see it now. The buildings are like a monument to the tiger in some respects. They're like tombstones, really. They hold a bit of history from the tiger and the recession, and yeah, they're here and they're just slowly decaying. Another house was partly skimmed, the pink mix of gypsum like salmon flesh smeared on the walls. A drill head lay frozen in a caked bucket. Forgotten or abandoned, it was seized there now. Stacks of discarded roofing slate which had come from Chinese mines littered the grounds in imperfect patterns. The rush owned it now. There's a great sense of tragedy about the place and a sort of a sense of foreboding, and like the Irish, you know, the puka, there was a sense of many pukas around here, many ghosts, and so, you know, the ghost estates were being haunted in some sense. And Carriglass in the history of Longford is quite pivotal, and there is also, you know, there are many there was many darker forces at work in the history here, you know, usurpation of land, suppression of the native Irish, and the more times I came here, the more a sense I got of that sense of sadness to it and eeriness. And you know, today we can hear the wind just rustling through these buildings and the raindrops falling, and you know, they're like an elegy to nothing.
Many post-colonial theorists look on Irish history as a story of discontinuity, of land struggles, violence, displacement, revolution, oppression, in contradistinction to English history with its continuity of purpose and public institutions.
But if you look through a different lens, a strange continuity begins to reveal itself. The land reified by both invader and indigenous, the estate in its multiple formations re-emerges, the poor forever shunted into precarious space.
So to paraphrase Connolly, same oppressor bearing a different flag.
Not quite. Emancipation through land. Not as something primordial, but as a value system. Prioritizing the landlord over the tenant, the developer over the community, so that the social becomes an anachronism. First through neglect, then marginalization and active discrimination, and finally through the promise of renewed emancipation, the private sphere, the housing estate.
And the rest is left in ruins.
I think that's what our voice needs. I think that's what
I do think Longford people have a great sense of pride about the county, but I'm often struck by the difference that maybe sometimes they have, particularly people who aren't from the town, about the town, that they're a bit more standoffish about the town, yet they'd be very proud of their own parish. Maybe they'd be fierce proud of Kilo, very proud of those outlying areas, if you like. Just that different attitude about the town, you know.
Welcome to our Christmas morning Mass in this beautifully restored St. Mary's Cathedral, Longford. This morning, 5 years ago, the people of Longford, in the start of the hard and panic night, woke up to the news that their cathedral was in flames. 5 years later, we rejoice in its restoration. We give thanks to God for all who made this possible. On this Christmas morning, we give thanks to God for sending us His Son to be our light, our guide, and our Saviour. We call to mind all who are near and dear to us, family members and friends, those at home, and those who are away from them this Christmas. We also pray for those who are no longer with us. We ask our pardon and we ask
science room. I really didn't like this class at all. I remember I used to just sit there. I remember these because it was real uncomfortable. You couldn't put your legs, you know, and then when we'd have tests, she'd move us all out. And I remember there was this girl and she was in leaving her and she was pregnant and none of the nuns would teach her and she wasn't even allowed to go into the shop or anything. And I remember at that time, like, not really understand. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't understand why. Everything was about shame, you know? And girls had to be a certain way, or if they weren't, they were bad. And I think a lot of that I got from the school, you know? She used to make when we came in, make us all pull down our skirts and make sure they were all down past our knee, you know? And then I remember some girls that just come in, before they go into her class, pull their skirt up really high just to get a reaction from her, you know? They weren't wearing it that way, but it was that kind of thing, you know? Like, putting shame on us or something for being girls. I mean, when I was leaving, the school started getting a really bad name. From what I see, what happens in Longford is a school gets a bad name and a bad reputation because they say, oh, travellers are going to that school, or people from the town or whatever, and then that school gets a bad name, and it's almost like then another school get a good name, and it's like this kind of pattern or circle goes around, you know?
The Irish Republic is entitled to and hereby claims the allegiance of every man and every woman. The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberties, equal rights and equal opportunities to all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and all its parts, cherishing all the children of the nation equally, and oblivious of the differences carefully fostered by an alien government which has divided a minority from the majority in the past.
And Longford has an important place in the history of the 1798 rebellion because it was where General Lambert and his French army were finally defeated. The Battle of Ballymuck on the 8th of September was the last episode of Humbert's expedition in 1798, and it was also actually the last major pitched battle fought on Irish soil. I mean, subsequent battles were of a much smaller order, and they were in the nature of ambushes and so on, like in the War of Independence. North Longford was one of the hotspots in the War of Independence, which would have been 1919 to 21. For a period from the end of 1920 up to spring of 1921, there was a period of 4 or 5 months there where there was intense activity in North Longford. You had burning of Granard, an attack on Ballinlee, a couple of attacks on Ballinlee, the second of which was successful. You had the Clonfane ambush then following in February of 1921. And again, no more than in 1798, you can imagine the kind of terror that ordinary people must have felt. the Black and Tans and the auxiliaries were active in the area. And they were active in all of Longford, but not as much because no part of the county was as much a centre for the struggle as North Longford was.
Signed on behalf of the Provisional Government, Thomas J. Clark, Sean McDermott, Poetic H. Pearce, James Connolly, Thomas MacDonough, Eamon Cant, and Joseph Plunkett.
Ghost developments, disused warehouses and factories, light industrial units and abandoned hotels, shopping centre complexes that never saw the light of day, empty shop fronts and stripped retail units, on-people super pubs and dormant entertainment venues, half-built infrastructures, boarded-up council houses. These are all as much a preoccupation and fascination.
Sites like this, obviously they're tied very much into the employment prospects of any area. And in a lot of ways, these kind of sites tell a bigger story about the uneven nature of the property bubble and the uneven nature of the Celtic Tiger period as well. Because we had this situation where construction employment was spread throughout the country. Construction in Longford, I think, made up about 12% of employment in 2006. So you can see that a lot of people were sort of working in this area, a lot of people are working in this space. And contrastingly, these kind of sites, or employment in these kind of industrial spaces, is something that can tell us a lot about, the sustainability of economic prosperity over the time period as well. So if you look at where industrial employment was located, where factories that are supported by the IDA, for example, are located, you can see that they're located really around the main cities, whereas kind of rural areas like Longford got very little of that sort of share. Since then, we've got a bit of erosion, some of the materials. You've got obviously people in here drinking whatever, there's broken bottles here, you can see some graffiti in the place. So the places begin to be sort of reused then in different kinds of ways. And this has really slipped down the back of an industrial estate, so you can see it being an enticing kind of prospect for local teenagers maybe to make use of.
Welcome to Outtake Media's Making Your Way in Community TV. We have a great show for you lined up today, which is the outcome of a lot of hard work by our trainees who are bringing us on a journey of people and places they've visited in Longford. These people, these stories that they've got, bollocks.
But we want to look at cameras, camera positions, and then in the control room itself.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Now, if you got that banjo skin properly exposed, his face might be too dark. So it's a balancing act, you're always balancing a bit of this off.
And all the best with all the new actors.
Get out and then I can run the questions with Annie and just to get an idea of her answers and how long the answers are going to be or whatever.
Yeah. Well, as I said, we can do it 2 ways. We want to show you how to do some editing.
It's kind of precise, isn't it?
But we can...
2 things.
One. But if you think of the audience, it would be for
guitar players.
Can maybe move that?
Especially if it was
The play itself would have been written in the 1930s, 1940s, and it's like it could be set in modern times. It still has the whole issues of immigration, which all you have to do is look around you and see that there's young people fleeing their shows day and
Right,
night.
I think that's okay, isn't it? You're so much better at it. if you're in the gated school? Because that's what he did say, so it looks like you know your interviewee instead of sure. I'm asking, did you do that? Okay, great. Yeah.
In a sense,
I turn off the Aries when I can. No, the videos are okay, just the Aries.
But because your eyes is picking up everything else and you're panning the camera.
Yeah.
This is a community television studio, and this time last year there wasn't one.
Having space in an empty warehouse is ideal for us. It's low cost, and as a result we can offer this to the community at large.
There's just now an opportunity for a small, modest county with a shy personality to document life in Longford, like for ordinary people to document local personal experience. And see you tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Coola boola.
Okay, get out. It's on.
Giving me a lot of old rope, and you're still giving it to me. What good are fellas like Danger Mullally to the world?
If we take this take and I was nearly up in his face, they're kind of going around a bit, so then that one doesn't matter as much. Do you know when you're lining up the sound? How does that happen then?
Well, we see we're syncing the sound, whatever it is, right, with the clapperboard.
Okay.
So as long as you don't press stop, you're not in the shot. You're in the shot.
Okay.
Back. You're out of the shot there.
Great. Okay. Now tell me one stop going there. Do you want it to be really quiet and it's all it's all okay.
I can see it, yeah. You roll?
Okay,
I'm
rolling.
You were never thrown away. But you'd be left behind in the suitcase or you'd fall to the floor and be swept out of the room.
Oh, great God, if I was there the day they crucified you, huh? Well, I bet what soldiers stood at the foot of Calvary.
No. No, he'd keep his own cross. He said, thanks, Dendler. Thanks, old son. But this is the way it's got to be. And he'd hold out his hands and he could be.
Peace. Peace. Peace.
That's great stuff. Niall, excellent.
I probably need
And I would be quite into charisma.
Once you've him there and maybe he just doesn't look right, maybe he's, he's too dark or he's slightly out of focus or whatever. If you go to settings, there's 3 buttons here.
4, 3.
So we look forward to seeing Brew in a Hollywood blockbuster in the near future. So now Brew is going to interview Annie about her work as an artist, visualising sound with the help of a metronome.
The other thing I didn't really fully understand, even as a child as well, that this thing that is so mathematical is meant to fit with music, which is so emotional and so fluid-like, The other thing I didn't really fully understand, even as a child as well, that this thing that is so mathematical is meant to fit with music, which is so emotional and so fluid-like,
Thanks a million for coming on the show and giving me a wonderful...
Thank you very much.
There you have it, folks. You learn something new every day. So we'll see you in part 2. Stop.
Very good, very good.
Brew, will you do your ending again?
That's where we used to have all our work. And no one took art seriously. It was really hard to learn anything because everyone used to just take the art class as a mess, And then anyone that actually wanted to learn, it was really hard, Look at the walls there, it's like, that wasn't done in art class anyway. There's no way you would have been allowed to do something like that. It was more obviously like playful, kind of, I suppose, and you felt free or something at that time. I felt free in that class compared to the other ones. Yeah, obviously you're like creating something, and you weren't told what to do. You know? You didn't feel pressure and I feel like I'm gonna start crying or something. Oh, so weird.
We came today to paint 3 murals, me, Katrina and Kevin Bohan, and spent some time here in this lovely city.
Okay, and what's your impression of Longford in general?
It's a really nice city, and the festival is really nice because we're walking through the street and it's like this pop-up shows, and it's nice to see what people actually is doing, you know, like everyone's putting effort and, you know, showing the artistic side. I think it's a
I
great
think that
place.
the most positive thing is people reaction, because I think this is one of the first graffiti event here, or street art events, and I think that reaction is the most important thing for us, and it's really nice. People are coming and saying that they like it, you know, and that's what it's about.
You were laughing.
And what happened that you got this place down in the end? Because you were going to get Dublin Street, wasn't it?
Yes, but Anne called me just before the expression saying that the owner from the other shop didn't get back, but this guy left the keys at the bottom. She said, let's go with this. I said, yes, do.
I'd like to buy it. I don't know what my daughter would think. I don't know where I'll hang it. But he's been in 3 times. So I'm like, yeah. And I've had my mate, like the Kevin and the Peter, and they're looking at it.
This isn't recording yet. Okay. No. Sorry, just say your name as you're answering Paddy. Just say
Shelley. Okay, Shelley Barker.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay.
You're involved with the festival that's happening at the moment. Could you tell me about that festival and your involvement with it?
Okay, well, Crow Festival, it started actually 3 years ago. It was called Love Longford at that point, and then in the second year it changed its name to Crow. So basically it was using all the vacant spaces around the town as basically pop-up art galleries. So, I mean, because of the recession and everything in Longford, the same as anywhere else, there's going to be vacant areas right in the middle of the town.
Frantic dreams in childhood. The shapes, spaces, contours, textures and sounds, all distorted and amplified without an outlet, a means of expressing the self. We thought that art meant the distinguished painter, the noble genius exiled in the studio, with easel and canvas and palette. We couldn't be that, so forgot and dreamt.
We had like a career guidance teacher, and art was never what's the word? I suppose they never really encouraged us, you know. But it was all about what job you'll get, you know. And I, at that time, never knew anyone that was an artist, like, you know.
Was it something that was sort of stifled in Longford in a way?
Because likewise, I don't remember reading any artists when I was growing up or being talked about ever around galleries or exhibitions. Do you think that was kind of something that was, I don't know what the word I'm looking for.
There was no, it wasn't in your environment, like there was no, like when we were brought out from school to different events and stuff, it would never be to go to a gallery or, you know, there was never anything like that here, so I suppose that was why, like, and they focused an awful lot on drawing and doing portraits and having it perfect, having it look exactly like the person, you know, and that's not.
I'm coming from Poland, and there is one town called Łódź, and a few years ago they made a project called Urban Forms, if I'm not wrong, and they already around 35 murals, and they painting on old factories, for example, abandoned factories, and this city is not the most beautiful place in Poland, definitely, but because of the murals, it's starting looking really good, and there is more tourists, definitely. Television from abroad is making shows about this place. You know, they're showing murals, and it's good promotion for town, for city, you know, and for artists, for people that live in the town, because more tourists coming, then, you know, generally economy probably will be growing here if you do this, you know, and if you have a lot of factories, it's a perfect place to start, you know.
We saw, when the square cleared of artists and recording devices, 3 young traveller girls intricately discussing a piece of art. Look at the circles she did here. Is that newspaper she's pasted on? Aren't the colours fabulous?
The filmmaker as voyeur, the need to capture, frame, expose a given context, to dramatise, convey the affective and emotive qualities of human experience.
Here we pause and breathe, for that which is the instinct of the filmmaker would cause slippage, a rupture in time, and arrest a direct, unmediated experience. What we see outside the gallery, new identities formed, redefined, interpreted, articulated. Art is not a final piece, but as an amorphous, constantly shifting expression of the new.
And then you cease to dream.
People talk about the demise of Longford town. I was in a pub. I was kind of in a middle-class, old Longford pub. Around a month ago, I mentioned how we'd just done a TV programme, we'd launched it, and this older man, and the next thing out of his mouth was, Longford is finished as a town. Longford is going nowhere down. It was kind of came out of the blue, whatever it is, and there was a bit of a put down in it, but there was also something, mature reflections of an older, more intelligent man, you know. But what if Longford is finished as a town? And I was thinking, well, the concept of Longford as a town isn't really much more than 200 years old. Okay, there was something here more than 200 years ago, but the sense of it as a market town, as a place with kind of businesses where...
I see that as a positive. I see new cultures arriving here, kids growing up in school here from different cultures, is a really good positive thing for a place like Longford, because it increases the gene pool of thought and of how life is to be lived, and you know, it's a richer community as a result.
And you are seeing a lot more work being done on the local scene in terms of visual arts, and that's a huge thing, because visual is everything, as you know, and that is how you go to changing the perception of a place, if you like, you know, to show it how it actually is, you know, warts and all. That I'm not saying that Longford is perfect, it certainly isn't. It does
through
need
various
a lot
tax
of,
breaks and stuff, many houses were built,
particularly in
and these were to accommodate commuter people going to work in Dublin, but sadly those houses are now vacant and the people never came. The people never came even in the boom times, so yeah, Longford is kind of straggled between the past and the present now and trying to figure out its own destiny.
I think that Longford's going to continue to have problems if we continue to have the type of uneven economic system in the country that we do have, and we don't have substantial infrastructural investment, for example, from the state to
a lot of the jobs, most of the jobs here are created by SMEs. They're indigenous jobs. So I would prefer to see more supports going to people who are running those type of businesses, maybe than, you know, jumping up and down looking for that elusive Google that really isn't going to come down the N4 to Longford.
There is a sense of kind of a lot of Longford as kind of neglected, people just being left to their own devices, like, you know, kind of people on painkillers, like, you know, a large minority of people that have no economic or social value that are put in these housing estates that are drip-fed, social welfare, cheap booze, home entertainment systems, consumption of media, you know, through phones and devices, whatever it is, and it's just providing this great distraction from the boredom of being...
Loss of confidence, loss of self-esteem, pressure on the marriage, pressure on family life, all those things which are much less tangible than the empty houses and the half-finished houses. You know, there's the destruction of that took place internally within people. I think we have to kind of look at the consequences of that, and it's still there. It's still being played out, I think, when you consider that there's mortgage arrears are still
during the Celtic Tiger years, and before that, it was kind of drilled into you growing up, you know, get married, buy a house, settle down. The previous generation was, you know, if you don't own your own house, well then, what are you going to do in your later years? You can't be renting the whole time.
Still a huge problem with still a huge problem with mortgage arrears. Still a huge problem with that debt bubble aspect of the crisis that hasn't been worked out, that hasn't worked itself out through the system either. And there has been virtually no change to the system of housing that we're actually continuing with. So we still have this debt-based model, we still have owner occupation as the only secure tenure option. There hasn't been social housing.
We're a small country with a small population. The island has the same population as Greater Manchester. And we've done a really good job in fucking it up so many times in my own lifetime. You know, let's try something different. You know, let's get the debate going, let's get the political will. But I don't think it's there, unfortunately. And unfortunately, as in any other Western democracy, no political party sees past the next election.
Some of the houses are done and the others are ruins. Those will be fixed up by the councils. That is part of the national plan. As to the ones that are completely vacant, they're kind of gone beyond the point of repair. So I would say that many of them will be knocked on, you know, health and safety grounds.
If we build it, they will come, you know. Well, they didn't come. The Troika came instead. If we ever needed a reminder of the folly of capitalism at its worst, it is
that they are starting to disappear. Even the word ghost estate, you don't hear it as much, like, you know, it's starting to disappear. It's starting to fade into memory.
Once that narrative becomes fixed, once we sort of identify a narrative that explains the Celtic Tiger and explains it through the ghost estate and explains the ghost estate as part of it, then they become less of a haunted place or less of a troubling place, and therefore begin, you know, cease to have such a function in upsetting or unsettling our views about society. So there's less sort of artistic purchase in them, perhaps. And I think what arts interventions could do and should do is find new ways in which they can kind of take this site and sort of begin to sort of make it troubling again. Because there's lots that isn't resolved around unfinished estates. There's lots that isn't resolved around the issue of ghost estate.
The ghost space renovated, refinancialized, resolved, a conscious act of forgetting. Here we go again on this speculative merry-go-round.
You know the future is concentrated in the hands of the few. What would you have us do?
We are not tenants or landlords or investors or homeowners. We make space. We are public. We are citizens.
What would you have us do?
I think we should find our way home.